Commander Min-ho Kim's boots touched the strange crystal floor with a soft click that echoed through the alien air. The moment he stepped off Earth's diplomatic shuttle, he knew his life would never be the same. The platform beneath his feet wasn't made of any material he recognized. It looked like frozen starlight mixed with diamond dust, and it hummed with a gentle vibration that traveled up through his legs. His team of 5 diplomats stood close behind him, their nervous breathing visible in small puffs of vapor. The alien world's atmosphere was thicker than Earth's, making everything feel heavy and dreamlike. Dr. Hana Park, their language specialist, clutched her translation device so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Captain Yeo-jun whispered something about the gravity being wrong, while Engineer Haye-won kept scanning the area with wide, amazed eyes. The Velthari escorts who greeted them were nothing like the computer simulations back on Earth. They stood, nearly 8 feet tall, with skin that shifted between silver and deep blue like oil on water. Their movements were too smooth, too graceful, as if they were dancing through honey. When they gestured for the humans to follow, their forearms moved in perfect harmony, creating patterns that seemed almost like a silent language. Min-ho forced himself to walk with confidence, even though his heart was pounding like a drum. He had trained for this moment for 3 years, ever since humanity's long-range scanners had detected the Velthari civilization. But no amount of preparation could have readied him for walking through corridors made of living coral that pulsed with soft pink and blue light. The walls actually breathed, expanding and contracting in a slow rhythm that made him feel like he was walking through the bloodstream of some massive creature. Strange sounds echoed around them, whispers that might have been the wind, or might have been voices speaking in languages older than human civilization. The air itself seemed alive, sparkling with tiny lights that danced just at the edge of vision. When Min-ho reached out to touch one of the coral walls, it felt warm and smooth, like touching the skin of a sleeping giant. The throne chamber doors opened without any visible mechanism, simply melting away like ice in sunlight. The room beyond took Min-ho's breath away. It was massive, with a ceiling that stretched up into darkness, and walls covered in flowing patterns of light that moved like slow rivers. Hundreds of Velthari nobles lined the sides of the chamber, their eyes glowing softly in the dim light as they watched the human visitors with curiosity and caution. But it was the Queen who commanded all attention. Queen Ariavel sat on a throne that looked like it had grown from the floor itself, its surface covered in patterns that pulsed and shifted like a living heartbeat. She was beautiful in a way that was completely alien, yet somehow familiar, her 6-foot frame elegant and powerful at the same time. Her skin had the same color-shifting quality as her people, but with streaks of gold that marked her royal status. Her eyes were the most unsettling part. They were large and multifaceted, like a dragonfly's, but filled with an intelligence that was clearly ancient and deep. As those eyes moved from one human to another, Min-ho felt like she was reading their souls, understanding things about them that they didn't even know about themselves. When her gaze finally settled on him, Min-ho felt a chill run down his spine. There was something in the way she looked at him, not just curiosity or diplomatic interest, but recognition, as if she had been waiting for him specifically, as if she already knew why he was there before he did himself. The Queen's voice didn't come through her mouth. Instead, it appeared directly inside Min-ho's head, like a gentle whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The sensation was so strange that he almost stumbled backward, but he forced himself to stay still and listen. Her mental voice was soft, but carried the weight of centuries, like hearing an echo from the beginning of time itself. Dr. Hana Park frantically worked with her translation device, but she quickly realized it was useless. The Queen wasn't speaking in any language that could be translated by machines. She was communicating through pure thought, sharing images and emotions that bypassed words entirely. Hana's hands shook as she tried to take notes on something that couldn't really be written down. The Queen began to tell them about the Kethmoran, and as she spoke, images flooded their minds. They saw ancient Velthari cities that stretched across entire continents, with spires that reached toward the stars and gardens that bloomed with flowers made of pure light. They felt the pride and joy of a civilization that had mastered the secrets of life itself, creating art and music that could heal broken hearts and buildings that grew like living things. But then the images changed, becoming darker and filled with sadness. The Queen showed them the coming of the plague, not a disease that attacked the body, but something far worse. It was a genetic curse that spread through their people like invisible fire, stealing away their ability to create new life. Minho watched in horror as he saw Velthari families grieving over empty nurseries, as their population began to shrink year by year. The plague had started small, affecting only a few individuals in remote colonies. But it spread faster than anyone could have imagined, jumping from one generation to the next, like a deadly game of tag. Within 50 years, half their people could no longer have children. Within 100 years, that number had grown to 90%. Now, 3 generations later, only 5% of the Velthari could still reproduce, and that number was dropping every day. Captain Yeojun felt sick as he watched the images of entire planets being abandoned as their populations died out. Cities that had stood for thousands of years now stood empty, their living walls slowly dying without anyone to care for them. The Queen showed them schools with no children, parks with no laughter, hospitals where doctors could only watch helplessly, as their entire species slowly faded away. But then came the most shocking part of the story. The Queen's forearms moved in complex patterns as she shared the ancient prophecy that had kept her people hoping when all seemed lost. The Kethmoran spoke of a Star Walker who would come from beyond their world when the darkness was deepest. This being would carry within them the key to salvation, the power to restore life to a dying people. As the Queen gestured toward Minho, her multifaceted eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made him feel like he was being examined by a powerful microscope. She explained that their oldest texts described the Star Walkers' unique neural patterns, the specific way their brain waves moved and flowed. When their sensors had first detected Minho's ship approaching their world, they had scanned all the humans aboard. Only one person matched the ancient descriptions perfectly. Engineer Hyawan gasped as she realized what the Queen was saying. The prophecy wasn't just about any human, it was about Minho specifically. Somehow, an alien civilization had predicted his arrival thousands of years before humans had even discovered fire. The Queen's next words hit the diplomatic team like a physical blow. Her mental voice became urgent, almost desperate, as she explained. The final part of the prophecy. The Star Walker and the last fertile Queen must bond together, joining their life forces in a way that had never been attempted before. Only through this union could the genetic curse be broken and new life return to her people. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the gentle humming of the living walls around them. The medical bay on the human ship hummed with frantic activity as Dr. Jin Woo Lee worked through the night, his eyes bloodshot from staring at genetic sequences that shouldn't have existed. Coffee cups littered his workstation, and his usually neat lab coat was wrinkled from hours of non-stop research. When he first ran the DNA comparison between humans and Velthari samples, he thought his equipment was malfunctioning. The results were so impossible that he ran the tests 7 more times, each one confirming what his scientific mind refused to accept. Hidden deep within human genetic code, buried in what scientists had always called junk DNA, was a sequence that perfectly complemented Velthari reproductive cells. It was like finding a key that had been waiting millions of years for the right lock. The sequence was so rare that only 1 in 10 million humans carried it, and even then, it remained dormant unless activated by very specific conditions. Dr. Hannah Park paced around the lab like a caged animal, her translator device still clutched in her hands, even though it was useless for what they were dealing with. She kept muttering to herself in Korean, switching between amazement and disbelief. "This changes everything we know about human evolution," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Either this is the biggest coincidence in the universe, or something guided our development specifically for this moment." The process the Queen had described, Jara bonding, was unlike anything in human medical knowledge. It wasn't surgery or medicine in any traditional sense. Instead, it required 2 willing beings to open their minds and bodies to each other completely. sharing not just physical DNA but consciousness itself. The bonding would create a psychic bridge that could carry genetic information between species in ways that normal reproduction couldn't achieve. Captain Yeo-jun stood by the viewport, staring out at the alien world below while the scientists worked. His military training had prepared him for combat, for negotiation, even for first contact with hostile aliens. But nothing had prepared him for the possibility that one of his crew members might need to sacrifice his humanity to save an entire alien civilization. The weight of the decision was crushing, and he wasn't even the one who had to make it. Engineer Haiwon worked frantically at her station, trying to understand the technical aspects of what the Queen was proposing. Her scanners showed that Velthari biology was based on quantum resonance at the cellular level. Their reproductive process relied on synchronized energy patterns that the genetic plague had disrupted. The rare human DNA sequence could potentially act like a tuning fork, helping to restore the proper resonance to their reproductive systems. But the process came with risks that made everyone's blood run cold. The bonding might change Minho permanently, altering his DNA in ways they couldn't predict or reverse. He might lose his humanity entirely, becoming something between human and Velthari. Or worse, the process might kill him, leaving Earth without their best diplomat, and the Velthari without their prophesied savior. Late that night, as the rest of the crew slept fitfully in their quarters, Minho received a private communication from Queen Ariavel. Her mental voice was gentler this time, filled with sadness and understanding rather than desperate hope. She didn't try to convince him or pressure him with the fate of her people. Instead, she simply shared her truth with the kind of honesty that cuts straight to the heart. "I know what I'm asking of you," her voice whispered in his mind as he sat, alone in his quarters. "I'm asking you to risk everything you are for people you've known for less than a day. This isn't about politics or trade agreements or building alliances between our worlds. This is about survival, not just for my people, but for the potential that our two species could become something greater together." She showed him images of what the bonding might create, hybrid offspring who could survive in environments that would kill either pure human or pure Velthari. Children who could communicate across the vastness of space without technology, who could heal genetic damage that had plagued both species for generations. The possibilities were as terrifying as they were amazing. Minho stared out his small window at the alien stars, knowing that whatever choice he made would change the course of history for two entire civilizations. The emergency session in Earth's Global Defense Council turned into a shouting match within minutes. Admiral Tae-ho Song slammed his fist on the conference table so hard that water glasses jumped and spilled across the polished surface. His face was red with anger as he pointed at the holographic display showing Minho's diplomatic team on the alien world. "This is insanity," he roared at the assembled politicians and military leaders. "We send our best people to make first contact, and now they want one of them to marry their queen? What's next? Are we going to start a breeding program?" The room erupted in arguments as representatives from different nations and colonies began talking over each other. Some saw the proposal as humanity's chance to gain incredible alien technology and knowledge. Others worried it was a trap designed to weaken Earth's defenses by taking their most skilled diplomat hostage. The debate raged for hours, with no one able to agree on what Minho should do. President Ji-won Park tried to maintain order, but even she seemed overwhelmed by the implications. "We're talking about the first interspecies marriage in human history," she said, her voice barely audible over the chaos. The legal implications alone could take years to sort out, let alone the biological and cultural consequences. Meanwhile, on the Velthari homeworld, their own political crisis was unfolding in the crystal spires of their governing council. Noble Keth-Sian, an ancient Velthari whose family had ruled for over 1,000 years, stood before the assembled lords with his forearms spread wide in a gesture of absolute rejection. His skin had turned a deep purple color that indicated extreme anger in their species. "Our bloodlines have remained pure since the first awakening of consciousness on our world," he declared, his telepathic voice carrying waves of disgust and fear. "Now you ask us to contaminate ourselves with the essence of these creatures, these beings who crawl on the surface of worlds instead of living in harmony with them? I would rather watch our species fade into honored extinction than see us become mongrels." His supporters filled nearly half the council chamber, their skin colors shifting through various shades of agreement and concern. They had watched their civilization slowly die for generations, but the idea of mixing with aliens seemed worse than death itself. Some whispered that the humans were probably diseased, that their strange biology might make the plague even worse instead of curing it. Queen. Ariavel sat on her living throne, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the bioluminescent patterns that covered the chamber walls. She listened to the debates with the patience of someone who had ruled for centuries, but inside, her heart was breaking. Every day of delay meant more of her people would die. The fertility rates were dropping faster now, as if the plague had somehow sensed that a cure was close, and was working harder to complete its deadly work. Dr. Sujin Chen hadn't slept in 3 days. Her laboratory on the human ship had become a chaotic mess of alien tissue samples, genetic scanners, and coffee-stained research notes. She was racing against time to understand exactly what the bonding process would do to Minho's body and mind. The partial information the Velthari had shared was like trying to understand how a computer worked by looking at a single circuit board. Her findings were both fascinating and terrifying. The bonding wouldn't just combine DNA, it would create a permanent psychic link between Minho and the Queen. They would share emotions, memories, and possibly even thoughts for the rest of their lives. The process might also trigger evolutionary changes in both species, creating new abilities and characteristics that neither had possessed before. Captain Yeo Jun worked with his security team to prepare for the worst-case scenarios. Intelligence. Reports suggested that extremist groups on both worlds were planning to disrupt any bonding ceremony through violence. Some humans wanted to kidnap Minho and bring him back to Earth by force. Some Velthari wanted to assassinate both him and their queen to prevent what they saw as the ultimate blasphemy. The tension was becoming unbearable, and everyone knew that time was running out to find a solution that both species could accept. The Queen's invitation came as a surprise to Minho's entire team. Instead of formal diplomatic meetings in sterile conference rooms, Queen Ariavel wanted to show him how her people actually lived. She appeared at their ship early one morning, accompanied only by a single advisor, wearing simple robes instead of her royal regalia. "Come," she said through her telepathic voice, "let me show you who we really are." Walking through the Velthari capital was like stepping into a living dream. The buildings weren't constructed from metal or stone. They had grown from the ground like massive coral formations, their surfaces breathing and pulsing with soft light. Some structures stretched high into the sky like crystalline trees, while others spread horizontally like blooming flowers made of pearl and silver. Minho reached out to touch one of the walls and gasped as it felt warm and alive under his fingers, almost like touching someone's skin. The streets themselves were strange and wonderful. Instead of pavement, they walked on surfaces that felt like soft moss but glowed with gentle bioluminescence that responded to their footsteps. Everywhere he looked, Minho saw technology that was alive rather than mechanical. Vehicles that looked like giant beetles carried passengers through tubes that grew between buildings. Streetlights were actually living creatures that hung like jellyfish from organic lampposts, their bodies glowing brighter as the day grew darker. The Velthari citizens were just as fascinating as their city. They moved in small groups, their skin colors constantly shifting to reflect their emotions. When they saw their queen walking with the human visitor, waves of color rippled through the crowds, blues and greens of curiosity, warm golds of welcome, and occasional flashes of red that Minho learned meant concern or fear. Thamira, the queen's closest advisor, became Minho's guide to understanding their culture. She was ancient even by Velthari standards, her skin bearing patterns of silver that marked her as a keeper of knowledge. Through careful telepathic communication, she taught him how to interpret the color changes, how to show respect through specific gestures with his arms, and how to participate in their unique form of group meditation. In return, Minho shared human customs that amazed the Velthari court. He showed them how humans used vocal music to express emotions, singing simple songs that made the aliens' skin shimmer with delight. He demonstrated human games like chess, which fascinated them, because it was based on conflict and strategy rather than harmony and cooperation. Most surprising to them was the human custom of individual privacy. The idea that people could keep thoughts and feelings completely to themselves was almost incomprehensible to a species that shared emotions naturally. The Festival of Twin Moons was the most heartbreaking experience of Minho's life. As the two moons rose together in the alien sky, thousands of Velthari gathered in the Great Plaza for what should have been a celebration of new life. Traditional ceremonies were performed exactly as they had been for millennia, with priests blessing empty cradles and singing songs of welcome to children who would never come. Minho watched as couples went through the motions of rituals meant. For parents, their skin colors cycling through deep purples and grays of grief. Elderly Velthari, who remembered when the ceremonies had meaning, stood with tears flowing down their faces, knowing they might be witnessing the last festival of twin moons their species would ever celebrate. That night, as the celebration continued, around them with forced joy, Queen Ariavel led Minho to a private garden where they could speak freely. Here, away from the duties of leadership and the weight of ceremony, she revealed her deepest fears. Her telepathic voice was barely a whisper as she shared something she had never told anyone else. "I am the last," she said, her skin taking on. Colors Minho had never seen before, deep blacks mixed with silver that spoke of absolute despair. "Every other female of royal blood is gone. My sisters, my cousins, even the distant relatives who might have carried on our genetic line, the plague took them all. If I cannot restore fertility to our people, there will be no more queens after me. Our entire civilization will simply end." The weight of that responsibility was crushing, and Minho finally understood why she had been willing to risk everything on an ancient prophecy about star walkers. The weight of two civilizations pressed down on Minho's shoulders as he sat alone, in his quarters, staring at the official recall order that had arrived from Earth that morning. Admiral Teho Song's message was clear and brutal: return immediately or face court-martial for treason. The words on the screen blurred as Minho read them for the 10th time, his hands shaking with exhaustion and stress. He hadn't slept properly in weeks. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw images of dying Velthari children and empty nurseries, mixed with nightmares of angry Earth politicians calling him a traitor. The decision he faced wasn't just about his own life. It was about the survival of an entire species and humanity's future relationship with the stars. Dr. Hana Park knocked softly on his door, carrying 2 cups of coffee and the latest reports from Earth. "The protests are getting worse," she said quietly, sitting down across from him. "Some people are calling you a hero for trying to save the Velthari. Others want you arrested for even considering marriage to an alien. The whole planet is divided." Minho took the coffee with grateful hands, savoring the warmth and familiar taste of home. "What would you do, Hana, if it was your choice to make?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring out the small window at the alien world below. "I became a xenobiologist because I wanted to understand life in all its forms. The Velthari aren't just another species. They're proof that consciousness and intelligence can develop in ways we never imagined. If we let them die because we're afraid of change, we'll be responsible for the greatest tragedy in galactic history." The assassination attempt came 3 days later, just as Minho was walking through the ship's corridors to meet with his team. Lieutenant Boram Jang's quick reflexes saved his life, tackling him to the ground just as energy bolts from Velthari rebels sizzled through the air where his head had been. The attackers had somehow infiltrated the ship's security, using their natural camouflage abilities to blend with the walls until they were close enough to strike. "Extremists from both sides want you dead," Boram explained later as she coordinated new security measures. "The human fanatics think you're betraying our species. The Velthari purists believe you're going to contaminate their bloodlines. We're fighting a war on 2 fronts now." Engineer Hee-Won Kim worked frantically to modify the ship's medical bay, installing alien monitoring equipment that the Velthari had provided. The technology was beautiful but incomprehensible, crystalline structures that hummed with their own internal light and responded to thoughts rather than physical controls. "I have no idea how any of this works," she admitted to Minho. "We're basically performing surgery with tools we don't understand on biology, we can't comprehend." The pressure from Earth intensified daily. Video messages from his family begged him to come home. His old academy friends sent letters reminding him of his duty to humanity. Government officials made increasingly desperate threats about what would happen if he went through with the bonding ceremony. But it was during his final conversation with Queen Ariavel that Minho finally found the courage to make his choice. She met him in her private chambers, wearing the crown of first light for the first time since he had known her. The living circlet pulsed with ancient patterns of light that seemed to contain the memories of every queen who had worn it before. This crown has been passed down through 3,000 years of rulers, she told him, her telepathic voice heavy with history. Each queen who wore it faced impossible choices, but none faced anything like this. I am asking you to risk everything you are for people you barely know. Minho looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not just an alien queen or a political leader, but a person carrying the unbearable weight of her species' survival. In that moment, his decision became clear. "I'm not doing this for politics or diplomacy," he said quietly. "I'm doing it because it's right, because when we have the power to save lives and choose not to use it, we become responsible for every death that follows." The Queen's skin shifted to colors he had never seen before, deep golds mixed with silver that spoke of gratitude so profound it had no words. "History will judge us both," she whispered, as they prepared for the ceremony that would change the galaxy forever. The journey to the Chamber of Eternal Flowing took Minho deeper underground than he had ever been in his life. The Velthari escorts led him through winding tunnels that spiraled down toward the planet's core, their walls covered in living crystal formations that pulsed with soft rainbow light. The air grew warmer as they descended, filled with a gentle humming that seemed to come from the planet itself. Minho's human team followed at a respectful distance, their faces tense with worry and amazement. Dr. Hana Park clutched her recording devices, trying to document everything even though she knew no amount of scientific equipment could truly capture what was about to happen. Engineer Haiwan kept checking her scanners, amazed by the energy readings that grew stronger with every step they took downward. The Chamber of Eternal Flowing took Minho's breath away when they finally reached it. The circular room was carved from living rock that sparkled like diamonds, with streams of bioluminescent liquid flowing down the walls in patterns that created the most beautiful music he had ever heard. The flowing streams moved in perfect harmony, their glowing currents weaving together like a symphony of light and sound that resonated in his bones. High above them, through a natural opening in the rock, the twin moons of the Velthari world were beginning their rare alignment. Their combined light streamed down into the chamber, mixing with the bioluminescent flows to create an atmosphere that felt both ancient and otherworldly. Minho could feel the power of this place in every cell of his body. It was like standing at the intersection of science and magic. High Priestess Vel Andra was the oldest Velthari Minho had ever seen. Her skin had taken on a permanent silver coloration that marked her as someone who had lived for many centuries, and her forearms moved with the grace of someone who had performed this ceremony countless times before. Her telepathic voice carried the weight of tradition and wisdom as she began the ancient preparations. "This bonding has not been attempted in over 1,000 years," she explained, her mental words reaching both Minho and Queen Ariavel. "It was created for times when our species faced extinction, when only the most desperate measures could save us. The process will join not just your bodies but your minds and souls. You will become something new, not fully human, not fully Velthari, but something greater than either." Queen Ariavel approached the center of the chamber, wearing ceremonial robes that seemed to be made of living light. The crown of first light. On her head pulsed in rhythm with the flowing streams around them, creating patterns that hurt Minho's eyes to look at directly. Despite the ceremony's importance, he could see the fear in her multifaceted eyes. She was as scared as he was. The priestess guided them to lie on platforms made of the same living crystal as the walls. As the twin moons reached perfect alignment, overhead, their light focused into a beam that bathed both Minho and the Queen in silver radiance. The bioluminescent streams began to flow faster, their music growing louder and more complex. "Empty your minds of fear," Velandra instructed. "Let your consciousness flow like the eternal streams. Allow yourselves to merge not as conqueror and conquered, but as two parts of a greater whole." The transformation began slowly. Minho felt a tingling sensation that started in his fingertips and spread throughout his body. His vision began to blur, not with darkness, but with colors that had no names. He could feel Queen Ariavel's presence growing stronger in his mind, like a warm light approaching through fog. Then suddenly their consciousness crashed together like two rivers joining into one. Minho gasped as he experienced memories that weren't his own, the weight of ruling millions of people, the agony of watching children die from a plague he couldn't cure, the loneliness of being the last hope for an entire civilization. Through Ariavel's memories, he felt what it was like to make decisions that affected entire worlds, to carry responsibility so heavy it could crush mountains. At the same time, the Queen experienced Minho's human memories with wonder and amazement. She felt humanity's incredible drive to explore and survive, their ability to adapt and overcome impossible challenges. She experienced the warmth of human family bonds, the excitement of discovery, and the stubborn refusal to give up even when facing certain death. The bonding deepened, and they began to share not just memories but emotions, hopes, and dreams. Minho felt the Queen's desperate love for her people, mixed with his own determination to help them survive. The boundaries between their individual selves began to dissolve, creating something entirely new. The medical scanners started going crazy just 3 hours after the bonding ceremony ended. Dr. Nari Cho was monitoring Minho's vital signs when her equipment began detecting something impossible, genetic activity that shouldn't have existed. At first, she thought her machines were broken, but test after test confirmed the same incredible result. New life was forming, not in any womb or laboratory, but in the quantum space that now connected Minho and Queen Ariavel's consciousness. "This is beyond anything we understand about biology," Dr. Nari whispered to her stunned research team. The scanners showed energy patterns that looked like DNA, but they were made of pure light instead of physical matter. These quantum embryos were developing at a rate that defied all known science, growing and changing by the hour instead of the months that normal reproduction required. Engineer Hire One worked frantically to modify their equipment to track these impossible new life forms. Her instruments detected something that made her hands shake with excitement. The quantum embryos were somehow drawing energy directly from both the human ship and the Velthari biotechnology around them. They were learning to adapt before they were even fully formed. The first hybrid child materialized in the Chamber of Eternal Flowing exactly 7 days after the bonding. Minho and Queen Ariavel were both present, their minds still partially connected from the ceremony. They watched in amazement as a column of light slowly took solid form, revealing a being that was clearly both human and Velthari, yet something entirely new. The child, who would later be called Velmin by the Velthari and Jinho by the humans, was beautiful in a way that transcended either species. Their skin shifted colors like the Velthari, but in patterns that resembled human emotions. They had 2 arms instead of 4, but their eyes held the multifaceted depth of their alien heritage, mixed with the warmth of human expression. What made the hybrid children truly remarkable wasn't their appearance, but their abilities. Within hours of materializing, Velmin was communicating telepathically with both parents, but their mental voice carried something new, the ability to translate thoughts perfectly between human and Velthari consciousness. They could understand and bridge the gap between 2 completely different ways of thinking. Dr. Nari documented everything as more hybrid children appeared over the following weeks. Each one was unique, displaying different combinations of human and Velthari traits. Some could survive in the vacuum of space for short periods, their bodies automatically adapting to hostile environments. Others could communicate across vast distances without any technology, their thoughts traveling faster than radio waves. The second child, Arya Jean, showed the most dramatic abilities. During their first week of existence, they accidentally healed a Velthari elder who had been dying from the genetic plague. The child simply touched the elder's hand, and somehow their hybrid DNA pattern acted like a cure, repairing the genetic damage that had made reproduction impossible. Word of the healing spread through both civilizations like wildfire. On Earth, crowds gathered outside government buildings, demanding that more humans be sent to participate in bonding ceremonies. The possibility of gaining superhuman abilities through alien partnership was too tempting for many to resist. But the reaction wasn't entirely positive. Extremist groups on both worlds became more violent, seeing the hybrid children as proof that their worst fears were coming true. Human purists called them abominations and demanded their destruction. Velthari traditionalists claimed they were false life that would corrupt their species' ancient purity. The attacks came without warning. A group of human terrorists attempted to bomb the research facility where Dr. Nari was studying the children's abilities. At the same time, Velthari rebels tried to poison the water supply in the Bio-City, where some hybrids were being cared for. But the hybrid children proved they could defend themselves in ways no one expected. When the human terrorists approached with explosives, young Velmin somehow sensed their intentions from miles away and warned the security teams. When the Velthari rebels released their poison, Arya Jin absorbed the toxins harmlessly and converted them into harmless light energy. The children's protective abilities sparked new debates about what role they should play in both societies. Some wanted to use them as weapons or tools. Others believed they should be studied like laboratory specimens. But Min Ho and Queen Arya Vel, now permanently connected through their bonding, insisted that the hybrids be treated as what they truly were, the hope for a better future for both species. As more hybrid children appeared, each with unique abilities that combined the best traits of both civilizations, it became clear that the bonding ceremony had created something unprecedented in galactic history. These weren't just children. They were the first members of a new species that could bridge any gap between different forms of life. The transformation of Minho into Kethmin wasn't just about gaining a new title. It was about becoming something that had never existed before in galactic history. 6 months after the bonding ceremony, he stood on the observation deck of the first interspecies colony ship, watching human engineers work alongside Velthari bioshapers to create something that belonged to both civilizations and neither. His reflection in the viewing port showed the changes the bonding had made to his appearance. His eyes now held flecks of the same shifting colors as Velthari's skin, and his hair had taken on a subtle luminescence that pulsed gently with his heartbeat. More importantly, his mind had expanded in ways that human science couldn't explain. He could sense emotions from across the ship, understand alien concepts that had no human words, and sometimes even glimpse possible futures branching out like rivers in his consciousness. Queen Arya Vel approached him, her own appearance changed by their connection. Her multifaceted eyes now held hints of human warmth and expression, and her skin patterns had become more stable, showing the steady determination that marked human personality. Together, they had become living bridges between their species, each carrying pieces of the other's nature. "The colony ships are ready for their first mission," she told him, her telepathic voice now carrying traces of human speech patterns. "3 worlds have volunteered to host our joint settlements. The preliminary surveys show they're perfect for both our species to live and work together." The hybrid children had been essential to making these colonies possible. Velmin, now 6 months old, but with the intelligence and communication skills of someone much older, had learned to translate not just between languages, but between completely different ways of thinking. When human engineers wanted to build with metal and concrete, and Velthari bioshapers preferred growing living structures, Velmin found ways to combine both approaches into something better than either could achieve alone. Arya Jin had become the colony's chief problem solver, their unique abilities allowing them to adapt any environment to support both human and Velthari life. They could somehow adjust atmospheric pressure, regulate temperature, and even modify soil composition just by touching the ground and focusing their hybrid consciousness on the task. Dr. Nari Cho had become the galaxy's first expert on hybrid biology, documenting abilities that seemed to break every law of physics. The children could communicate instantly across light years without any technology, simply by focusing their thoughts on someone they wanted to reach. They could survive in environments that would kill both humans and Velthari, their bodies, automatically adapting to hostile conditions. Most remarkably, they seemed to be able to heal the genetic damage in pure Velthari simply by being near them. The political landscape had changed dramatically as well. On Earth, the initial fear and anger had given way to cautious optimism, as people saw the benefits the hybrids could bring. The children's ability to solve problems that had plagued humanity for generations, from environmental damage to genetic diseases, made it hard to argue against the bonding program. Among the Velthari, the success of the hybrids in reversing the genetic plague had won over most of the population. Birth rates were climbing for the first time in centuries, and children were being born healthy and strong. The few remaining purist factions found themselves increasingly isolated as their people embraced the hope that the human partnership had brought. But the real breakthrough came when the hybrid children began demonstrating abilities that went beyond what either parent species could imagine. During a crisis on one of the colony worlds, when a massive solar storm threatened to destroy all life on the planet, 12-year-old but months-old Velmin somehow redirected the stellar radiation away from the world using nothing but focused thought. We're not just creating colonies, Minho realized, as he watched more hybrid children playing together in the ship's gardens, their laughter creating actual waves of light that danced through the air. We're witnessing the birth of something that could change how life itself works in this galaxy. The galaxy's other civilizations had begun to take notice. Long-range sensors detected ships from distant worlds approaching to observe these unprecedented interspecies settlements. Some came with curiosity, others with concern, but all recognized that humanity and the Velthari had achieved something that would reshape everyone's understanding of what was possible. As Minho looked out at the stars, now seeming brighter and more welcoming than ever before, he understood that their desperate gamble to save a dying species had become something far greater. The beginning of a new age, where cooperation between different forms of life could create miracles that neither could achieve alone. The future stretched ahead like an infinite canvas, waiting for these new hybrid beings to paint possibilities that no one had ever dared to dream.